let's talk about the Golden State Warriors because I don't want to say it, so I'm not going to, but I'm going to flirt with the idea that the championship window is closed. Now, maybe some of you are like, hey, no shit, dude. They're not any good. They're 10-13. They were 5-1. Remember that when they were 5-1, and we're like, man, could Curry win another MVP? And look at what all the stuff that they're doing. I don't think they were a 5-1 team. I don't think Curry was going to be able to sustain the offensive output that he was having, and we could see at the close of last night's game why it's going to be really hard for him to be as efficient as he normally is. But it's just bad. Here's a number for you. Last year when they got into the playoffs, despite the weird road record and the road defensive stuff, where they were just atrocious defensively on the road, one of the things that they always banked on for the Warriors is that their starting five was a net plus 22 last year. That's a massive number. You want to talk about a massive swing? It's minus 10.2 going into last night's game. So the starting five, that resume, the trust, and I know people can look at Kerr and say, man, he's being really, really stubborn with all this, and Clay's not good, and Wiggins isn't good, and I'll get to the Draymond part of this here in a bit. I don't know that the young guys are dramatically better, but they were last night, and you could see that Kerr finally started the second half. He was like, all right, I'm not doing this. Wiggins, Clay, not doing it. And he didn't close with Wiggins or Clay either. It was Podziemski. He kept Chris Paul in, whose shooting numbers since the disastrous start of this have turned around a bit. Look, I think Chris Paul's fine for what he needs to be for them. And yet Clay was so bad, and you're just, he's on the bench watching the end of this game. So let's get to the Draymond part. He gets ejected now a third time this season. He'll be suspended. As an aside, punishment Twitter, not my favorite content, because if you're not the most punitive voice out there, then you're doing it wrong. I see some of the projections for what should happen with Draymond, because he straight up punched Nurkic in the face. Like, I don't want to hear about it. The open hand, closed hand. Okay, fine. It was open. He knew exactly what he was doing. These guys are world-class athletes. He knew exactly what he wanted to do, and in that moment, he wanted to hit Nurkic in the face. After the game, Draymond said, I'm not, what was the quote? I'm not one for apologizing. Yeah, we're aware, dude. We're aware. But then he did say he wanted to apologize to Jusuf. He said he was trying to sell the foul, and that's why he spun around the way he did. Total bullshit. Don't believe him. I don't think any of us should. Now, having said all those things, it doesn't mean that I think the guy should be suspended 20 games. But punishment Twitter is a harsh world. It was the same time with the Ja Morant deal, because if you're throwing around a number, like I thought 25 games was excessive for him. I think I was one of the few people saying that. And I had people be like, how could you? And I'm like, I don't know. Like 20, what do you want? 50 games for this guy? Like, I don't even think it should have been 25. But again, there may be more information that I am not privy to that the NBA is. And that's why they went in the direction that they went. So to finish up the Draymond part of it, look, it's selfish. It's always been selfish. It was selfish in 16. He's in all these altercations, he's actually never right. Like there's a few times every now in the league, you'll see something happen and you're like, okay, I can kind of see what happened there. Or this guy doesn't really do this. I remember when I interviewed him in Toronto during All-Star weekend, I asked him about 16. We're sitting there and I was just like, is there any party that kind of wonders, like, can I do all this without doing this? And he just like looked at me and kind of like laughed. And I got his point. It's like, he is wired this way, and him being wired this way is what made him all this money and made him an NBA player. And we've covered this before. I mean, he even brought it up. I think he even quoted the $75 million of that contract that he'd had at the time. So this sounds weird, but like, I actually respect that. I respect that part of it. But it's now crossed over in the last couple of years into territory that's entirely about what he wants to do in that moment and not what his team needs him to do. Because they're 2-6 now in games where Draymond has been suspended or ejected. And this is somebody who's just never really shown any remorse for it whatsoever. After he punched Poole last year for apparently Poole calling him an expensive $30 million backpack for Steph Curry, he was out on TNT's desk promoting his mini documentary from Japan. I mean, the whole thing was a joke. The tone was ridiculous. The editing of the documentary, now granted, if you're getting access to him, you're going to make every star of the documentary his own hero. But it was like when he was exiled from the team. You're like, motherfucker, he punched his teammate. And we all saw it. So, that's the part that I think is most alarming. And, after the last ejection, I thought Kerr really had Draymond's back in a way that was, it made me think he was worried about him. Even Nurkic said the brother needs some help or something. But it's not what the Warriors need right now because the other guys aren't playing well. So they bring in Podziemski. They went with Kuminga. They played with Moody some more. There's a lot of Saric possessions. I would argue way too many for a good basketball team or a team that's supposed to be good. But Wiggins has been terrible. 41% from the floor, 28% from three. His PER is 7. Like when you're a single digits PER, start getting the foreign language apps. All right. He was 15 last year and he was kind of disappointing. Clay, who wasn't just 1 of 8 from three, but like fumbled the ball out of bounds. He just looked defeated. He has, for the month, if you go by months, and granted we have some incomplete months here this early into the NBA season, 40% from three, 35%, now 28% from three in December. He was just bad last night. His PER has gone from 15 last year to 10. If you looked at Klay Thompson's stat line, even with a diminished line of last year, if you looked at this year's line in the metrics with last year, you'd be like, who's that guy? Like, that's a completely different guy. So both guys aren't getting it done. And Draymond is dealing with his own bullshit half the season. And it leads to Steph Curry taking a ton of brutal shots. Steph could shoot even more. If he had a different mentality, he could shoot even more, but he's basically not going to take more than 20 shots per game with this team. In the fourth quarter, he knew. He's like, I don't have Clay. I don't have Wiggins. You know, Podziemski has his moments and he's a rookie, so it's kind of fun, but there's also going to be some moments where you're like, what are you doing? Moody's been just way steadier this year, which I think is a good sign. Kuminga still feels real hit or miss, which may just be who he is at this point. Some of the Chris Paul Saric stuff where I'm like, the ball is ending up with Saric's hands way too many times for this team. Curry goes 1 of 8 from the fourth quarter. And if you watch those shot attempts, you could see him kind of, when I talk about quarterbacks and interceptions, elevating his risk, right? Where you're like, man, Steph knows, and he has to figure out a way for this team to score. And, you know, he didn't make any of those shots. 8 shots for him in a quarter coming in the fourth quarter substitution pattern is a lot of shots for him, but he knew he needed it. And they still almost came back with some sloppy stuff from Phoenix there towards the end. So can you write them off? Can you say right now, mid-December, that's it, Golden State is done? I know that stuff sells. It doesn't feel as egregious to say that now as saying it against the Alabama Crimson Tide, which so many people did after the South Florida disaster where they still won the game, but you get my point. If I don't know how it all fixes itself, where they're at least like a 6 or a 7 seed, and we're like, oh man, I kind of like their matchup in the first round. But I'm not going to do it. As tempting as it is, and I know so many of you have done it, and you might be right. You'll be on the right side, the early side, whatever you want to say. I get the reluctance from some of the basketball people on this because we've seen this team, you know, do so many great things. So look, I'm kind of lying to myself here a little bit because it just has looked bad now for a long enough stretch. But let's see how another month or so plays out before I'm ready to do it. Dallas's win in Dallas against the Lakers and the resurgence of Dante Exum. Let's go back to that draft. Big Exum guy. How could I not be? Tall, athletic, can dribble. He'll figure out the shooting, which, you know, it's always funny when a guy can't shoot. And you're like, oh, I'll figure it out. Like, or he won't. Exum was the 5th pick in the Wiggins draft. Believe it or not, Jabari Parker and Wiggins. I know you guys aren't going to believe this. I was working the draft that night, and there was actually a real Jabari Parker Wiggins debate. Embiid was the best player, but you were so worried about his health, you weren't quite sure what to make it. And then Aaron Gordon went 4th. And Utah, go back and read that stuff. It's like, man, did Utah actually maybe get the guy in Dante Exum? So he played 82 games his rookie year, and he was 19 years old. He was so good in some of the draft stuff leading up to it. I mean, people loved him. And he checked a lot of Russillo boxes back then. He missed his second season with a significant injury. He played 66 games, and then, you know, you kind of go through his NBA career, 14 games, 42 games, 35 games. I mean, on and on and on. 6 games with Cleveland in 2021. You probably forgot he was in the league as long as he was, because he came in it so young, and he just wasn't a factor. It was just kind of one of those deals every now and then. You'd be like, oh, that's right, Dante Exum. He was actually part of the Jarrett Allen, more known as the James Harden trade that involved Houston, the Pacers, Brooklyn, and Cleveland. Then when he was on Houston, he was waived. He played 2 years overseas. And the biggest thing with Exum was, as athletic as he is and the handle and maybe how he profiles defensively, like, he just can't shoot. So it was a real issue. And he was so nasty. I mean, I'm not talking like, Sean Livingston's knee injury was so awful that it really derailed what the peak version of Sean Livingston was going to be. And it speaks to just how nasty he was and how smart he was and how good he was at reading defenses, that he figured out a role for a really long time and was a big part of some of those earlier Warriors teams. But with Exum, again, it's more recent, that knee injury, than Livingston was. You're like, okay, what is he going to be if he can't shoot? Well, in the couple of years where he was playing in EuroLeague competition, 63 games, he actually shot it really well. 52% from the floor, 42% from three. In comparison with his NBA career numbers, 42% overall from the floor, 31% from three. So signs a 2-year deal worth about $6+ million total from Dallas before this season. And so far, 20 games into his NBA run this year, he's at 53 from the floor, 41% from three, which kind of matches Euro numbers. Now, look, I don't think he's still going to shoot this way, but he shot this way. Like, he shot better than that last night. He was incredible. He always could handle. It's kind of a nice, especially with Kyrie out the last couple of games, it's kind of a nice match with Luka, where you need another ball handler that can get kind of their own once the defense loads up on Luka, and Luka's going to find you. I mean, he was incredible again last night. We'll get to his numbers quickly, but it just worked, especially when you're going to make every single shot. I would argue I still don't necessarily love the way the shot looks, but they just all went in. He was 7-9 from three, 26 points. You got it going early, and you're like, is he going to carry this over in the second half? And he did, because there were some plays there with Exum. There was also an incredible drive that he had against Anthony Davis, where he got a good angle and was able to finish at the cup. And there were some Grant Williams threes in there as well. So Dallas did a really good job against this Lakers defense. It's been really good this season, but they had no Jared Vanderbilt, which I think was a big issue with the closing group there with the perimeter defender. So great stuff from Exum. I don't know that the shooting is going to hold up like this, but at least there's something in 2 years in the 63 games in EuroLeague competition that's a stark contrast compared to what he was as an NBA player, when he never shot it well consistently. So you think, if you look maybe just as the game was playing out, the 3-point storyline is the difference in the game, but the Lakers actually shot it really well. Dallas was 49% from three, and the Lakers shot 52% from three. I think the issue is that it's 6 less makes on 14 less attempts. So the Doncic perimeter stuff, we know what it is. A cool 33, 17, and 6 last night. And it looked like in the closing group, the preference for the Lakers was to have Taurean Prince on Doncic, and it just doesn't work. And it doesn't work for almost everybody that's trying to guard him. He is the best ISO guy. I don't care what the numbers are as far as like, hey, the ball's in your hand, get us a really good look. He's on that. To me, he's at the top of the list. I'm not saying it gets you through to an NBA championship, but it's just absurd. And there's some passing stuff that I want to get to here, but with Prince, even though he has the length to theoretically match what Doncic is, I think I'd rather have stoutness than length against Luka, because Luka's just going to get wherever he wants. And then if you double him, as we know, he's going to find the pass. And then you have Grant Williams in the corner making everything last night, and then Exum, and then Hardaway has his moments that are really big, Lively on the lobs that you have to worry about a little bit. So it was a really nice win from Dallas in this game. Now, the passing part of it, you know how I feel about like the high single usage guys. And I've broken down the history of that in the past. I'll probably bring it back again, where if you look at the highest usage seasons in NBA history and then look at what those teams do in the playoffs, it's almost never a success. It's not impossible, but it's almost never successful for that high usage guy for that season. Be like, okay, what's going to happen? Where's the playoff success? I mean, it was pretty alarming how bad the history shows that. Not to say that you can't have a season like Giannis getting everything done against Phoenix. So it always comes back to kind of the Luka Dallas question. I thought they passed the ball really well last night, and it's just so tempting because their overall pass numbers per game are incredibly low. They're They pass 257 times per game, which is 29th in the NBA, ahead of only, you guessed it, the Clippers, who, by the way, I owe a deep dive on. They're playing really well. The Harden adjustment with Westbrook playing less and using this group, and if they have more size eventually, it's something to pay attention to. It's just a health bet with them, which is probably the worst health bet in the NBA. So I owe a deeper dive on them, but for whatever reason, I can't watch their games until the next morning because my Lakers feed is working, but my Clippers one hasn't been since I've come back. So I didn't get a chance to watch the fourth quarter, or at least the closing stuff from the Clippers last night, this morning, because I was prepping for this. So back to the passing thing. So look, we know the Clippers don't pass. We know Dallas doesn't pass. And for Dallas, I mean, it's just, what are you supposed to do? I love making the defense work. Passing makes the offense easier. We all know this. And yet with Doncic, he can go at a slow pace. He can have the ball maybe longer than everybody else in the league per possession. And he's going to probe. He's going to get a good angle. He's going to break the paint. He's going to make somebody else come over and help. And hopefully you have a big that can hold up defensively against Anthony Davis. And Lively is not that yet. It's not fair to ask him to do that as a rookie. But Davis is, it's not the scoring. I know people make these second half scoring jokes about Anthony Davis, but even if he's having the bad second half scoring stuff, the stuff he's been doing the last couple of weeks where he is making it so hard on you to operate around the rim, whether it's you scoring or trying to, him cleaning up the defensive glass. It's just certain nights it's alarming how bad it is for the opposition in dealing with Anthony Davis. I thought I saw it in the Phoenix game. New Orleans was a blowout. I saw it again with the Pacers. Saw it last night. He's getting deep. He's getting wherever he wants. And even if you think you have something clear at the rim, I'm so excited about how well he's played and how physical and how much his presence has meant. So maybe hold off on the second half scoring jokes because I think there's just so much more that he's doing out there. And against Lively, it's just, certain times last night, you start thinking about the playoffs. You're like, okay, if they played each other in the playoffs, like how would this play out? And it's like, do they really have enough to handle a guy like Anthony Davis? I don't think a lot of teams do, to be honest with you. That's why I think all the contenders should be trying to find some big that they could close with if they don't have one right now. That's why people like Minnesota. That's why, despite being the best three-point shooting team in the NBA right now with Oklahoma City and having all these options that they can throw at you and all these multiple guys that can dribble, that can shoot, that can pass, all these guys with the ball in their hands that can do multiple things with the way the Thunder built their team. And then, of course, Jokic, which doesn't need to be added to, but you get the point. Like, you start kind of watching these teams play each other and you're going, all right, well, how would they deal with that in a 7-game series? And that's where, ultimately I'll get to Dallas and ask that question. But to finish off the passing thing, I thought the passing was better from Dallas last night, but it was about probably everybody making the shot off the pass. And then all the passes looked brilliant because their total passing number last night was 262. So that's basically only 5 more than where they're at. So it's just this. I sound pained talking about it, right? Because it's like, well, what do you want me to do? Take the ball away from Luka? Well, no, I don't want you to do that. But I guess I want more passing. But then I'm saying that I want 2 entirely different things. Dallas's offense right now is 3rd in the NBA. Defense is 23rd. Not great. If you look back at the Western Conference Finals Mavs, because I just don't think last year's team is worth looking at. That's why when we were doing the preseason stuff, I was like, I just feel like the NBA world is way too low on Luka, and we've seen him respond. And Dallas is a 3 seed today. That Western Conference Finals Mavs run team was middle of the pack offensively. They were much better defensively that year than they are this year, but I don't really care about last season when things got really weird. Look at the Dallas schedule. They were 8-2. I had said here on the pod, it felt a little schedule-y that, they're beating a lot of bad teams. Then they went to 11-8, and then I felt like I was kind of right, but they've won 4 straight. Their strength of schedule, though, is one of the weakest in the league, 27th. So far, based on the stuff I looked at today, some of the strength of schedule stuff. As I point out numerous times, we're talking about with the NFL, you can get some different variations on that, or college football is even more brutal with the strength of schedule ranking. But ESPN right now had Dallas at 27th. But Kyrie's missed 6 games. He missed last night. Hardaway's missed 3, and Maxi Kleber's missed 18. So they're the 3 seed, and I think the question is, are they a real West contender? I'm not ready for it. I'm not like the simple question, the exercise is this. If the Mavs won the West, would that be a surprise? Today, the answer is still yes for me. And that's kind of where I'm at. When you look at the West, it's so loaded that there's going to be weeks and stretches of the regular season where you're going, oh, wait, look at the seeding here. I'm telling you, Minnesota, you guys are getting really chesty about 17-5, and it's been awesome. It's tied for the best record in the NBA with Boston, but just hold off if not everybody's like, yep, they're winning the West, and there's nothing else to it, because you've got Oklahoma City there, Dallas, Denver that's had their own issues with the Murray injury, and then he missed another game, and then Jokic gets ejected last night. Sacramento, who I still think is going to have a really good record. I'm not sure how deep I would expect them to go, depending on who their first round matchup is. You get the Lakers part of it, and the Clippers, who won 5 straight now. Phoenix 8th, who I'm going to get to here in a second. Houston's 9th. You expect them to fall off a little bit. And the Pelicans, if they ever figure their stuff out. And then you've got Golden State Warriors. So let's go to Phoenix. 13-10. Don't really care. I could give you some numbers. Don't really care. Since Kevin Durant joined Phoenix last season, so if you add up all the games since that trade, when he was actually a member of the Phoenix Suns, you go through the regular season of last year, the playoffs of last year, and the games so far this season, the 23 games so far, the expected starting 5 for Phoenix has played a total of 15 times in 59 games. And that's 15 from last year and the playoffs, because it's been 0 this year. We thought we were getting Durant, Beal, and Booker, and then Durant was out last night with the ankle injury. So if you look at missed games, Durant's actually been the best so far. He's only missed 4. Booker's missed 9. Beal has missed 19, but he was back last night. The debut could be coming either tonight or Friday. But as long as they have Booker, they have a chance. I love them. We already know it. You don't have to go into a full breakdown on it. 10-4 with him, 3-6 without him. The stats, like I mentioned, they're 11th in offense. Defensively, they're 17th. I don't even know why I wrote them down, because it doesn't really mean anything. But that's another team that you add to this entire mix here, where then I'll start asking, like, okay, I know everybody likes the idea that Nurkic gets super worked up for the Jokic matchups. How's that playing out? Are they just going to be able to outscore them? Is Dallas's offense so good? Can it be so good for 4 games in a 7-game series that they can move on beyond a team to be favored against them? I think that part of it's a little bit fair, but I don't like to write off any teams. I just know how different the regular season is. I know the lulls of it. I know the stretches that we'll have where it looks like something's a little bit different. And as great as Minnesota has been, even, look at some of the other stuff, you're just going like, man, we might get a team out. We might just get some new blood here, even just in the Western Conference Finals. But it's going to be hard to write off Denver with the way Jokic has kind of dominated the league here. 2 quick things. The Zion is overweight blitzkrieg in Vegas. I'm gonna tell you folks something. And this was unpopular when I said it, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. But this should be a reminder to you, the people that you get mad at that are on TV, that are on radio, that are on podcasts, they don't watch nearly as much as you think they do. Now, that's not, hey, I'm giving myself a fucking medal because I watch. And I've learned plenty of times that talking about how much I watch or taking notes, like nobody wants to hear about it. So I try not to even, whatever. I have notes in front of me, but I don't know how else to do the job, right? But I remember one time when Skip Bayless had said, we was arguing about Chris Paul. He was like, I've watched every game he's played in his career, college and the pros. And it was just an absurd statement. And it wasn't true. And that was him saying that because I don't know, he was trying to win the argument, the whole thing. So I had said in a podcast years and years ago, it wasn't even specific about him. I was like, just don't get that mad because it's really hard. Like not having kids, I don't know how some of these other guys do it. Soccer practice would have gotten in the way last night. I wouldn't have figured out the second half rotation for the Warriors. I envy the guys that can do this and have a life and have all these different things going on. But the reason I bring up the Zion example is that if I say something where I'm like, oh, I'm worried about this team, I'm worried about this player, I really like this player, I really like what this team has done, I'll have had to have seen it like 4 or 5 times before I'm ready to even share it on a podcast. I would never not watch a team for like a month, watch them once, and then tell you what that team is or isn't for 10 minutes in a segment. I wouldn't, like that to me is like the antithesis of how, like I would feel so uncomfortable doing the job, just being like, I haven't watched that team for a month. You want a hard 7 minutes on them? I got you. All right. So part of it was everybody being in Vegas. Part of it was seeing it live and how bad Zion was against the Lakers. Because the Minnesota game, he was incredible. He was assertive. He was decisive. He was a little bit more aggressive. Maybe he got tired of being called fat for a week straight by everybody. But when I had said it after the Utah game previously, I had said, because I had already seen these things multiple times, knowing full well, as I tweeted out after that Pelicans-Lakers in-season tournament game, that the guy was going to get 30 again soon. Like, that's the scary thing about him. That's why I think it's so frustrating, because he can do that and still be this out of shape. But what I thought was really telling, and what you should always remind yourself of, is that it also proved that a lot of people that talk NBA hadn't watched him at all this fucking season. That's kind of what happened there. So everybody was on it at the same time, where they also, I think, collectively told on themselves that, like, yeah, I'm watching it. Now, maybe the out is we all saw it in person. Well, maybe. But seeing him against LA look that bad was not surprising to me, because I'd already put him on my worry list, I think a week and a half before that, because of the stuff. I think maybe it was just a week with the Utah back-to-back stuff, where I went, what is going on here? After I'd already seen it multiple times during the season. I think even after I did the post-Utah thing, he went at like 11 to 12 from the floor. So I know the dangerous game of wondering where it's going like when I'm worried about a player, it doesn't mean I think they're going to score 0 points in every game for the rest of the season. But I thought that was a little thing that you should remind yourself of when somebody's getting on your favorite team and your favorite player. Doesn't mean you're always right, but I know you've watched them more.